There is a paradox that most people only discover when it is far too late. The more desperately you chase something, the further it runs from you. The love you pursue with urgency slips away. The success you push for with frantic energy seems to resist you at every turn. The peace you reach for with anxious hands keeps dissolving the moment you think you have it, and then one day, without planning to, you let go. You stop pushing, you stop chasing, and quietly, almost without noticing, what you had been searching for so desperately begins to appear. Not through magic, not through luck, but because something fundamental shifted inside you, and that shift changed everything around you. This is not a spiritual concept without roots. This is a principle the Stoics understood more than 2,000 years ago, and one that modern psychology and neuroscience are only now beginning to confirm in measurable, repeatable ways. Today I'm going to give you 7 lessons that will explain exactly why this paradox works. What is happening beneath the surface when you chase something desperately versus when you release the grip, and most importantly, how you can use this understanding starting today to completely transform the way you pursue everything that matters to you. Stay with me through all 7 lessons, because the 7th one is the one that connects everything else. It is the one most people never fully grasp, and it is the one that makes the real difference. And the first lesson is the one nobody warns you about. Lesson 1. Desperation repels what you want most. When you want something from a place of lack, from the internal experience of "I need this to be okay," you are sending a signal that every person around you picks up on, consciously or not. Desperation has a texture. It has a sound in your voice, a particular quality in the way you hold your body, an urgency in the way you speak and move and react. Other people, whether they can articulate it or not, feel it immediately. And almost universally, they move away from it. It is not personal. It is instinct. Desperation signals instability, and instability creates discomfort in those around you. You feel it yourself when someone wants something from you too much, the way the conversation shifts, the way you start measuring your words, the way you look for an exit. The Stoics understood this with a clarity that still holds up today. They made a distinction between the person who governs themselves and the person who has surrendered that governance to something outside. When you are desperate for something external, you have already surrendered your internal authority, and that is the first thing others perceive, before your words, before your actions, before any strategy you try to deploy. They feel the absence of that internal steadiness, and they respond to it by pulling back. This is not a soft observation, it is a structural one. When you make your sense of stability dependent on something outside yourself, you have placed your foundation on footing you do not control. Every step you take from that place will carry the tremor of that instability, and the things you most want, the relationships, the opportunities, the outcomes, will sense it and resist. The practical consequence of understanding this is significant. When you stop needing something in order to feel okay, you stop emitting the signal that pushes it away. You create space, and in that space, things can arrive that could never reach you while you were chasing them. Letting go of the grip is not surrender, it is the first intelligent move you can make. Lesson 2. What you pursue with attachment chains you. There is something that very few people allow themselves to examine honestly. When you are attached to a specific outcome, when your stillness depends on whether a particular thing happens in a particular way at a particular time, you are not free. You are a hostage to that result. Every moment of your day is filtered through the question of whether it is bringing you closer to or further from the thing you are attached to. You celebrate small signs that it is coming and collapse in the face of signs that it might not. Your mood is not your own. Your energy is not your own. Your capacity for clear thought is not your own. They all belong to the thing you are chasing. You have probably felt this. The moment a conversation goes quiet and you start rehearsing what it means. The moment a plan takes longer than expected and your whole day shifts around that one fact. Epictetus spent his early life as a literal slave. He knew what captivity meant in its most physical form, and yet what he taught his students, drawn from that experience, was that the deepest form of slavery is not about chains on your body. It is about attachment in your mind. Seek to want only what is within your power, he said, because everything else, every outcome that depends on factors outside your control, can be taken from you. And if your equilibrium is attached to it, your equilibrium will be taken with it. This is where most people misread Stoicism. They assume it means not caring, becoming cold, indifferent, sealed off from what happens around you. That is not what this is. The Stoics cared deeply. What they practiced was the separation of their well-being from the specific form in which their desires were fulfilled. You can want something and still be free. That freedom comes from knowing your worth does not collapse if the thing you wanted does not arrive exactly the way you imagined it. When you release the attachment to the outcome and redirect your focus entirely to what you actually control, which is your effort, your quality of attention, your character in the process, something shifts. You become free again, and that freedom is itself attractive. People want to be near it. Opportunities recognize it. The very things you were chasing with anxious grip start to move toward you because you are no longer strangling them with your need, not because the dynamic changed, because you did. Lesson 3. Anxiety narrows your thinking and produces your worst decisions. When you are in a state of desperate wanting, your cognitive capacity genuinely decreases. Research in cognitive psychology consistently shows that the mind under emotional stress operates with reduced access to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for long-term thinking, nuanced judgment, and creative problem-solving. Instead, the stress response activates the more primitive parts of the brain, the parts focused on immediate threat and immediate survival. This is the mechanism behind every bad decision you have ever made from a place of frantic wanting. The Stoics describe this with precision that reads almost like modern psychology. The idea that you suffer more in imagination than in reality is not just a philosophical comfort. It is an accurate description of what happens inside you when anxiety takes over. Your mind does not simply assess the situation in front of it. It projects. It catastrophizes. It constructs elaborate scenarios of failure and loss that almost never materialize in the form imagined. And then it reacts to those imagined catastrophes as if they were happening right now. You send the text you should not have sent. You make the move that was too soon. You say the thing that reveals how much you need this, and in revealing it, you damage the very possibility you were protecting. The antidote the Stoics practiced was not suppression. It was not telling yourself to feel differently. It was learning to see the situation as it actually is, not as fear and desire paint it. To observe without the distortion of anxiety. To assess without the ache of desperation pressing on the calculation. When you bring yourself back to the present moment, when you release the catastrophic projections of the anxious mind and simply ask what is actually true right now, your thinking clears. And clearer thinking produces better decisions. And better decisions consistently made over time are what actually produce the outcomes you have been chasing with frantic energy. The Stoic practice of imagining your situation from a wider perspective, from a longer time frame, is one of the most practical tools ever developed for escaping the narrow tunnel of anxious thinking. When you feel the urgency of desperation narrowing your vision, lift your perspective. Ask not what needs to happen in the next hour, but what direction matters over the next year. The answer to that question almost never requires the frantic action that anxiety is demanding. Notice what is at the root of everything we just covered in Lesson 3. The bad text you send, the move you make too soon, the thing you say that reveals how much you need this. Every single one of those is the same thing, an automatic reaction that bypassed your judgment. Desperation does not destroy you through some abstract force. It destroys you one uncontrolled reaction at a time. That is exactly where I want to point you right now. I wrote an ebook called The Power of Not Reacting that goes directly into this. How to build the pause between the trigger and your response. How to stop the automatic reaction before it costs you something real. It is practical, it is built on Stoic principles, and it picks up exactly where this lesson left off. The link is in the pinned comment below. Check it out after this video. Now let us keep going. Lesson 4. Silent preparation builds more than loud pursuit ever could. You have seen this person. Maybe you have been this person, at least for a stretch of time. They are not the loudest in the room. They are not performing their ambition. They are not constantly telling you what they are working toward. They are just building, quietly, consistently, without needing anyone to watch. And when the results come, it looks effortless from the outside. It was not effortless. It happened through the most powerful form of effort available, the kind that does not leak its energy into performance. The person who gets the result is rarely the one who spent the most time announcing they wanted it. The Stoic tradition has a deceptively simple instruction that captures this entirely. Do not explain your philosophy. Embody it. Do not announce what you are becoming. Become it. The energy you spend announcing a desire is energy you pulled away from fulfilling it. Every conversation where you perform your ambition is a conversation where you are not doing the work. Every time you broadcast the goal, you extract a small release from the pressure of wanting it. And that release is the leak. That is where the momentum went. Think about the last time you told someone about a goal before you had done anything toward it. There was a release in that, a small satisfaction, and then, somehow, less drive to actually follow through. That is not coincidence. That is the mechanism. The announcement substituted for the action, just enough to take the edge off the urgency that would have pushed you forward. The Stoics had a word for the kind of attention that prevents this. Prosos, attention to oneself. Not in a self-absorbed sense, but in the sense of a craftsman attending carefully to the quality of their work. To watch where your energy is going, to redirect it from the performance of wanting to the practice of becoming. When you stop announcing what you are pursuing and simply become someone who could naturally have it, everything shifts. The shift is quiet. It happens inside before it becomes visible outside, but it is the most reliable form of progress you have access to. When you observe the world around you without the lens of your own frantic need, you begin to notice things you missed. Opportunities that were always there but invisible because your eyes were pointed inward. Connections that were possible but never made because you were too busy projecting your want onto people instead of actually seeing them. Silent preparation clears that noise. It creates the internal conditions where real information can land, where genuine opportunities can be recognized, and where the kind of decisions that look like luck from the outside can be made with clarity from the inside. Lesson 5. Accepting the present does not mean surrendering the future. You have probably felt this before. The moment someone tells you to accept things as they are, something in you resists. It sounds like giving up, like lowering the standard, like pretending you do not want what you want. But that is not what acceptance means in this context. Acceptance is not about abandoning your goals. It is about removing the unnecessary cost of fighting against a reality that already exists. Every moment you spend in resistance, in complaint, in denial, is a moment you are not spending on what you can actually change. The teaching is straightforward once you look at it clearly. Do not demand that things happen as you want them to. Accept that they happen as they do. This sounds passive until you examine it more closely. What it is actually describing is the conservation of energy. The Stoic does not collapse into the present and call it destiny. The Stoic accepts the present as the only accurate starting point from which any meaningful action can be taken. You cannot navigate from a position you refuse to acknowledge. You can want to be somewhere else and still need to know exactly where you are standing right now. Think about it this way. A navigator who refuses to acknowledge where the ship actually is cannot plot a useful course. They can have a destination in mind. They can want deeply to reach it. But the route from a false starting position will be wrong. Your present reality is your actual position. Accepting it clearly, without the fog of denial or resistance, is what allows you to build something real from it. When you are genuinely at peace with where you are right now, you work differently. The energy does not crash. You do not burn yourself down fighting a reality that already exists. And that consistent energy, sustained across time, is almost always what separates the person who achieves from the person who almost achieves. Accepting where you are without fighting it sounds simple. Doing it when the pressure is real is a different thing entirely. The ebook, The Power of Not Reacting, has a section built specifically for that moment, for when you know what you should do and your nervous system is pulling you somewhere else entirely. It is in the pinned comment below. Subscribers get 37% off. Lesson 6. Trust time more than you trust your impatience. You do not tell yourself you are being impatient. You tell yourself the situation requires it, that this is the right moment, that waiting any longer would be the mistake. And sometimes that is true, but most of the time, it is not the situation pushing you. It is the discomfort of not knowing. It is the ache of uncertainty dressed up as urgency. And acting from that place extracts a tax that gets paid later at a higher rate than the time you saved by not waiting. There is an old Stoic observation that time reveals the truth. Not just the truth of situations, but the truth of people, of investments, of relationships, of efforts. The thing you are building right now has a natural rhythm. It has stages it needs to move through. It has a maturation process that cannot be compressed beyond a certain point without something essential being lost. When you force it before it is ready, you get a result that looks like what you wanted but does not hold. The conversation you forced before it was ready. The answer you demanded before the other person had processed the question. The result you pushed for before the foundation existed. You already know what happened next. You have seen it. You may have lived it more than once. The version of the thing that arrived too early was never quite the thing you actually wanted. The long view is a discipline. It does not come naturally to minds shaped by urgency and immediate feedback. Train yourself to ask not what needs to happen today, but what direction matters across the next several years. Learn to distinguish between the urgency of the situation and the urgency of your own discomfort with uncertainty. When you can make that distinction clearly, you gain access to a quality of patience that most people never develop. And that patience, quiet and unglamorous as it is, turns out to be one of the sharpest advantages available to anyone building something that is meant to last. Lesson 7. Your inner peace is the real magnet. Everything else follows. Stop for a moment before this one, because this lesson does not just add to the previous 6, it contains them. Every lesson before this one was pointing here. The frantic need that repels, the attachment that enslaves, the anxiety that narrows, the silence that builds, the acceptance that stabilizes, the patience that protects. All of it was preparation for this. When you actually understand what comes next, not as a concept but as something you live, the experience of being you changes in a way that is difficult to describe from the outside and unmistakable from the inside. When you reach a state of genuine inner stillness, a stillness that does not depend on things outside going in a particular direction, something shifts in the way you move through the world. You do not become passive. You do not become indifferent. You become grounded. And groundedness is one of the most compelling qualities a human being can carry. People are drawn to it. Opportunities find it. Love moves toward it naturally because it does not need love in order to feel whole. That absence of frantic need is itself deeply attractive in a way that all the tactics and strategies for attracting love never quite managed to replicate. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal that he never intended for anyone else to read. In it, he returned again and again to a single idea, that everything you need for a good life is already available within, that the internal source can always be drawn from, if you always dig. He had access to every external resource a human being could want, and what kept him awake at night was not strategy or power. It was the quality of his own inner footing. That should tell you something. The person who had everything the external world could offer still understood that the real work was internal. This is where the paradox from the beginning of this video becomes completely clear. When you need something desperately, when your equilibrium is contingent on its arrival, you are standing on unstable ground. And from that unstable ground, everything you do carries the tremor of that need. But when you have built genuine inner stability, when your sense of being okay does not depend on any particular outcome, you begin to act from solid footing. And from solid footing, everything changes. Not because the universe rearranged itself for you, because you stopped standing in your own way. The Stoics had a concept they called the inner citadel. The idea was that within every person, beyond the reach of any external circumstance, there is a space that cannot be taken from you unless you give it away. Your thoughts, your judgments, your chosen responses, your values, your attention, these belong to you completely. When you invest in building that internal space, when you take seriously the work of developing your character, your judgment, your composure, something remarkable happens to your external life. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, across time, the outer life begins to reflect the quality of the inner work. When you're building from that place, something else happens too. The quality of your attention improves. You stop scanning every interaction for signs of whether it is giving you what you need. You start actually seeing what is in front of you. And seeing clearly is the prerequisite for everything else, for good decisions, for genuine connection, for the kind of work that accumulates into something meaningful over time. This is the thread that runs through every lesson in this video. Desperation repels because it signals a loss of inner footing. Attachment enslaves because it transfers your stability to something outside your control. Anxiety corrupts judgment because it collapses the distance between trigger and response. Silent preparation is powerful because it is the work of actually building something, not performing the desire for it. Accepting the present creates stability because it eliminates the cost of fighting reality. Patience allows things to mature because it trusts the foundation you have built, rather than forcing results before it is ready. And inner stillness is the magnet, because it is the natural expression of someone who has done the inner work, who stands on solid ground and who no longer needs the external world to confirm their worth. The invitation here is not to stop pursuing what matters to you. It is to change the ground from which you pursue it, to stop chasing from the hollow, hungry place of lack, and to begin building from a full, stable place. The effort does not become less. It becomes different in quality, cleaner, quieter, more effective, less wasteful of the energy that belongs to you and only you. There is one more thing worth saying before we close. The path from understanding these ideas to actually living them is not traveled in a single listening. It is traveled through repetition, through return, through the small daily decisions to pause before reacting, to choose a considered response over an impulsive one, to invest in the inner work even when the outer results have not yet appeared. The Stoics did not treat philosophy as intellectual entertainment. They treated it as daily practice, as a set of tools to be picked up every morning and used in the friction of real life. These ideas need to be returned to, practiced with, applied in the ordinary difficult moments where it is easiest to forget them. That is when they stop being ideas and start becoming who you are. We have covered all 7 lessons today. And if you want to go further with this work, if you want a structured, practical companion that will help you apply these Stoic principles in your daily life starting immediately, check out the ebook, The Power of Not Reacting. It is linked in the pinned comment below, and subscribers get a 37% discount. It is the most direct path from understanding these ideas to actually living them. Go find the link pinned below. 7 lessons. Let us hold them clearly before we close. First, desperation signals instability and repels the very things you want. Second, attachment to outcomes removes your freedom and makes you a hostage to results you cannot fully control. Third, anxiety narrows your thinking and produces the worst decisions at the moments that matter most. Fourth, silent preparation, the unglamorous work of building your actual capacity, always outperforms the loud performance of wanting. Fifth, accepting your present reality is not surrendering your future. It is the only accurate starting point from which a real future can be built. Sixth, time reveals what impatience destroys. The processes that matter most cannot be forced without paying a price later. And seventh, inner stillness is not a reward for getting what you want. It is the foundation that makes everything you genuinely want possible. The work is not about wanting less. It is not about lowering your standards or dimming your ambition. It is about pursuing everything that matters to you from a different quality of ground, from calm instead of fear, from trust instead of frantic need, from fullness instead of lack. When you stop reaching from emptiness and begin building from wholeness, everything shifts. Not because something outside you changed, because you finally stopped standing in your own way. If something in this landed, it landed for a reason you already understand. Share it with someone who is chasing something desperately right now. It might be exactly what they need to hear. Subscribe to this channel if you want to keep working on this, week after week, with content built specifically for people who are serious about this kind of inner work. And I will see you in the next one.